Killer Psychopaths, The Inside Story of Criminal Profiling by Paul Rowland is an attempt to describe the career of a professional profiler and examine famous true crime cases. One case that is discussed in the book is that of Jack the Ripper. To clarify, Rowland states that profiling is a blend of art and science, and if two careers were combined to create a profiler, it would be a detective and a psychologist. The most valuable resource in the book is when Paul Rowland shares one of the most famous reports on the Whitechapel murderer, and that is from Dr. Thomas Bond, who performed the autopsy on Jack the Ripper's final victim, Mary Kelly. Thomas Bond made the bold claim that in his mind, Jack the Ripper did not have medical knowledge, and he couldn't possibly have been a doctor, medical man, or even a horse slaughterer. This is not a belief that was accepted by everyone. Most notably, George Baxter Phillips offered a different interpretation of the evidence and stated that he believed that the Ripper did indeed have anatomical knowledge. The book continues with a discussion on the prime suspect, Aaron Kosminski, and Rowland shares a rudimentary and even superficial assessment of Kosminski as a suspect. Aaron Kosminski was originally from Poland, and he came to England when he was 16 years old. He was 23 at the time of the murders and trained as a barber and hairdresser, but was reported to have been mostly unemployed. Kosminski also suffered from schizophrenia. Ultimately, he ended up roaming the streets, eating food out of the gutter, and refused to bathe. Then he was institutionalized. Paul Rowland, like many other critics, state that these characteristics should eliminate Kosminski. Furthermore, he states that Kosminski spoke no English, and it is most likely that the Ripper conversed with the women who were murdered before the crimes, by luring them to secluded areas. To demonstrate that this analysis is superficial, inaccurate, and just plain wrong, Kosminski was not institutionalized until 1891, and he appeared in court in 1889, where he demonstrated that he could speak English to a reasonable degree, and even made a joke about not being able to work on the Sabbath, which prompted light laughter. These events also suggest that Kosminski was of a fairly sound mind in 1888, and his phobia of bathing and poor dietary habits, as well as the poor hygiene, hadn't taken shape yet. Therefore, the major strikes against him are easily dismissed. Later on in the Jack the Ripper section, Paul Rowland proposes that he has a Jack the Ripper suspect of his own, whom he chooses not to name. He believes that Jack the Ripper was a butcher who lived in the area and contracted syphilis from a prostitute. It is unclear whom he is labeling, but there is a high chance that he is referring to Jacob Levy, a man who matches those traits and is the subject of the book Jacob the Ripper by Neil and Tracy Ianson. According to me, Black Box Ned, both of these suspects, Kosminski and Levy, are defendable. During a later section in the book called Profiling and Patience, Paul Rowland talks about how criminal profiling is not as glamorous as it seems on TV. A profiler can spend weeks working on a case before they make a profile, and he also states that one can use a map to study the actions of a serial killer. Pins can be placed to identify the location of where the body has been discovered, where the victim was most likely abducted, and where the murder took place. The problem with the Jack the Ripper case is that the victims met the killer, were murdered, and discarded, all in the exact same place, to the best of our knowledge. This doesn't reveal a lot about the killer, and to anyone who claims that Jack the Ripper must have lived in the epicenter of these crime scenes, you could just as easily interpret the information as the Ripper traveled to the crime scenes because he didn't want the crimes traced back to his home. Unfortunately, there is very little data and evidence about Jack the Ripper, which is most likely why the case has gone unsolved for so long. If you like this episode, you can hit the like button and subscribe, and to hear a weekly show about Jack the Ripper, please visit Ripper Wednesday on Black Box Online Radio.